I'm Rantasmo, and BioWare needs more gay. The representation of marginalized people in video games has become something of a hot-button issue in the last few years, and it's increasingly difficult to talk about without basically ruining your comment section. How's it going down there, comment section? Okay, so one company in particular has been more or less at the forefront of LGBT representation in AAA video games. BioWare is best known for their epic, expansive, and highly story-driven RPGs, many of which feature an optional romance subplot with one or more of your companions. There are a lot of BioWare games, and analyzing all of them individually would take a long-ass time. So for now, this video is going to be more about BioWare games as a genre in a broader sense. Looking at the queer characters in BioWare games, I tend to look at things in terms of before Dragon Age 2 and after Dragon Age 2. Up until Dragon Age 2, we generally got one, maybe two potential love interests in each game who could be romanced by a PC of the same gender. Mostly women, or at least of a female-coded species, and almost always romanceable by a PC of the opposite gender as well. But with Dragon Age 2, nearly all of the potential love interests, with the exception of one available through DLC, can be romanced by any PC regardless of their gender. And people had mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, it allowed the player to customize the narrative more than ever before, giving them the opportunity to experience a same-gender romance with almost any character in the party. But audiences didn't interpret these characters as bisexual so much as player-sexual. In other words, the NPCs seem to have no sexual identity of their own outside of their relationship with the player. If you play a female character, for example, there's zero mention of Anders' romantic relationship with Carl. It only seems to exist if the player is male.
Why would you shy away from loving someone just because they're like you? Does it bother you that I've been with men?
That kind of gave the impression that these characters didn't have much agency of their own. But Dragon Age 2 did seem to have the effect of opening up the LGBT floodgates, as it were. The next two releases in BioWare's flagship trilogies gave us more diverse characters with a wider range of specific identities. Mass Effect 3 and Dragon Age Inquisition each gave us two exclusively gay options, as well as several bi- or pansexual options. And sexuality aside, I'd argue that they're some of the most likable and interesting characters that BioWare's ever created. Especially where Inquisition is concerned. Sarah is hilarious, Dorian is alternately charming and heartbreaking, and Iron Bull is... yes. Iron Bull is yes. It's also interesting to note that if you know what you're doing, you can find hidden voice files in certain BioWare games, suggestive of same-gender romances for characters like Tali, Miranda, and Cullen that didn't make it into the final game.
I confess, I've come to care for you. But it's occurred to me that I might not be foremost in your mind.
You're the only one I want, Thane.
But before you pull out the torches and pitchforks and accuse BioWare of removing those romances, it's important to note that since developers often have a limited amount of time with voice actors, they often have them record lines that they're not totally sure will make it into the next stage of development. It does suck that they didn't make it into the finished product, but that probably has a lot more to do with the sheer amount of programming and animation time that each new romance combination requires, on top of everything else they need to worry about, than it does BioWare being rampantly homophobic. Inquisition also gave us BioWare's first major foray into transgender representation, outside of the comics anyway. This is Krem, and he's kind of a big deal.
They ever wear shirts under the Qun, Chief? Or do they just run around binding their breasts like that?
It's a harness, Krem.
Yes, for your pillowy man bosoms.
Not many other games have placed a trans character into this big of a role and made their gender identity perfectly explicit. And Krem is a really good example of how to do that in an elegant way and not just have them go, yes, hello, I am transgender character, nice to meet you. His gender is woven into the story in a way that I think feels pretty organic. This is not to say that BioWare hasn't made some missteps when it comes to queer and transgender content. For instance, in Inquisition, if you take Sarah to the Orlesian Ball, she makes a comment that many people felt was inadvertently transphobic.
Crotch up, beats his squire. He's a she. As a bastard. Extra toes. What a fun, close marrying crowd.
Jade Empire's incongruous fade to black during the same gender makeout scenes is pretty inexcusable. And Star Wars The Old Republic's only queer love interests are restricted to a planet found in a separate expansion pack that many have dubbed the Gay Planet DLC. But the word I most often see used to criticize BioWare's LGBT characters, at least in certain circles, is tokenism. And frankly, I don't buy it. Tokenism is a real problem that's very prevalent in media, but I feel that the word is often used in a concern-trolly way to stealthily dismiss the inclusion of marginalized characters as pandering, or forcing an agenda down our throats, or that they're only there to shield the developer from criticism when that's not necessarily true. Tokenism isn't just when a character is queer, trans, non-white, or non-male without a quote-unquote plot reason for them to be so. And it's not even necessarily tokenism when a character is added to the story with the express purpose of making the cast more diverse. Tokenism is what happens when that character is painfully underdeveloped and makes no substantial contribution to the work other than helping it meet the bare minimum requirements of appearing to be diverse. In many cases, a token character's race, gender, sexuality, or disability will essentially be their only character trait, often relying on easy stereotypes or a bland, inoffensive personality. Oddly enough, I think that BioWare might arguably be guilty of tokenism in at least one case that has nothing to do with sexuality. Jacob is the one black squad member in the Mass Effect games, and he is so effing boring.
I want to say that working with you is a great opportunity to do something that matters. It's a privilege to serve on the Normandy, Commander.
Try describing Jacob's character traits in a way that isn't just the black guy. It's possible, but it's a challenge. Tokenism versus non-tokenism isn't a strict binary. Just because the one black guy on the ship is boring doesn't mean that he was only included to score diversity points, or that he's utterly without value as a character. Black people are allowed to be boring after all. But what I'm getting at is, I don't think anyone can claim that these characters are lacking in personality, or that their gender or sexuality is the only noteworthy thing about them. Yes, they might appeal to a few stereotypes, like the angry lesbian or the flamboyant mustachioed gay guy, but they also go well beyond those stereotypes. Your mileage may vary, but I look at the LGBT characters in BioWare games, and I don't feel like they've been shoehorned in just to make the game look more diverse. I feel like BioWare wanted their games to be more diverse, so they spent a lot of time developing these characters, making them likable, giving them flaws, and bringing them to life. And that's something that I definitely approve of. See?